Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle Cordy. I'm a transformational coach. I love helping people just rediscover themselves, to help stop the limiting beliefs, to take them from the caterpillar stage to the butterfly that's soaring. Just like myself, I walk my talk. Today, I want to talk to you about the pillar of divorce. And the topic today is how to recognize it's time for a divorce. I'm going to go through several clear signs that I experienced myself, and I want to share them with you. Having separate lives under the same roof. So it's not uncommon for people in a marriage to sleep in different rooms or have separate bedrooms. In a way, we were fortunate to be able to do so because so many couples do not have the space to afford this, to have their own space. And even my boys, and my boys are my birds, they had their own bedroom. It's okay. Society has coined it, we sleep in the same room. And then, I hear so many people that, I had a horrible sleep because of this or that of the other person. It's just like, I would love to sleep with my partner in the same room, but when you're being interrupted for whatever reason, you gotta work on yourself and help find the sleep that you need. And if it's in separate bedrooms, that's totally fine. But other signs of having separate lives under the same roof was, I'm not a big TV watcher, and he would watch TV, and I don't really like to watch TV. So we would try to find a show that we would enjoy watching together, which was good. But again, we were always trying to find the middle ground. Like, do you want to watch this with me? No, I don't feel like it. Or vice versa. Or, we would try to find, a movie or something, again, to find that common ground. So if you're not trying to accommodate one another and finding the middle ground, then that's also a red flag. And, division of energy, inability to be intimate and preserve the connection between two partners. Every person was set in their ways. And, it's okay to be set in your ways in certain things, but also have the conversations of the energy of what you want to give to one another. So what are your desires? What are your passions? What do you want out of the relationship? Communication is the key. But as I said in other videos, when you're feeling shut down of trying to be real, raw, vulnerable, and you're not experiencing the reciprocating the energy of what you're putting out and feeling the connection, again, that's another red flag. My ex would always sit in his chair, and I would always sit in the couch, sit on the couch. So, there was creating another division between us. So have the communication. Hey, I think you should come sit by me on the couch. Maybe we should have done that more, or maybe he should have made the initiative, or maybe, maybe I should have sat in his lap and in the chair. I don't know. So when you get more, when you get the red flags and they keep coming up, pay attention to that. We became like roommates, we became comfortable. But do you stay in a marriage because it's comfortable? Or do you work on it to find that, true love that you once had in the marriage? So just pay attention to, if you're living separate lives under the same roof, pay attention to those red flags. We stopped going on dates. So our date was going out to lunch and going grocery shopping. That became our norm. And sometimes we would explore other areas in our communities, Amish places that we enjoy going to. Love supporting local or surrounding areas, especially I like doing so. If you're just doing the same things and not, thinking outside the box, that's another red flag. And I've learned so many different things now that I'm divorced, just different venues, places that are close to me, community and gigs, and going out in nature. Like, I know things can be expensive, especially these days, but there's so many things that are free And going to the parks, I mean, some parks do charge a parking fee, or they will charge a yearly annual membership, but it pays off if you're going all the time. It's minimal cost too, but there's so much beauty, taking walks on paths and just really getting, having comfortable conversations with people you're with, getting to know people. So that would be something simple if you're in a relationship with somebody. That's an easy thing to do. It's inexpensive. I wish we would have done that more, but we just came stuck and stagnant with one another. And there were so many signs that things we could have done. And again, not spending much money. A lot of, I'm very fortunate where I live. I can be in 3 states within minutes of one another. So a lot of opportunities. And I mean, it ends up being just gas money. I know gas is expensive these days, but I mean, everything's expensive. But when you go to, one of the parks, like I suggest, there's so much beauty out there, waterfalls and creeks and just wonderful things that I've taken the time to explore and really get to know surrounding areas. And it doesn't cost anything. And it's so healing to be out in nature. The sun upgrades our DNA. It's so beneficial to really embrace nature and to ground with Mother Earth, meaning, if we can be in our bare feet to ground with Mother Earth, that's wonderful. But, just being outside, trying to get in the fresh air. And I know I'm recording this right now in the heat of the summer, but, go out early in the morning, wake up early. The sunrises have been absolutely gorgeous. So there's so many things that you can be doing. One of the things that we did do, and I did this for his 50th birthday, is I was spontaneous. I organized a surprise birthday trip for my husband's 50th birthday, and we went down to Florida. And it was very impactful. We did a lot in several, a few days, but when you don't allow ourselves to get excited about living and taking those spontaneous trips and just doing things not planned. I'm on spontaneous trips. They're so fun. Like, what do you want to do today? Let's go to, wherever. And just like, you just feel an energy shift within you. So be cognizant of these signs. Really think about what you want in a relationship and what you want to do and what makes you feel alive. Like what, don't just do something with your partner just to appease them. Make sure it's something that you want to do too, because you're in a relationship together. You might as well do things together and have fun and talk about things that you want to do. We had separate accounts. So there was always a lot of discussion about money. It was really difficult when I was unemployed. I had my money that I had saved, and, with things being so expensive, I went through my savings quickly, which worsened, my mental health because I was trying to find a job, trying to fulfill my soul mission and purpose, was attending a support group for career transition people like myself. Loved helping people, was helping people in the room, was putting myself last because I was a former people pleaser. I wasn't setting boundaries for myself. And even the thing that I look forward to, and I only get my haircut every 8 weeks, is it took me everything within my being to ask him for $50. Even after being together for 29 years, it took me every ounce of I just wanted to get my hair cut. And I would just feel bad for him, for asking him just for $50 to get my hair cut. And that was just my saving grace to get out of the house, because I was always in our basement working on the computer all day and just trying to, apply for applications for jobs and networking, and just, it's grueling. If you've ever been in career transition, and it is so time consuming. And my outlet at the time was just getting my hair cut. I've been going to my hairstylist for 35 plus years. And it's just it was just wonderful to get out and just to see another human being in person because I was always on my computer seeing people. And I felt bad for asking him just for $50. I hate having the lack mindset, just having different belief systems. And it came down to, and we had separate accounts, and my name was on his. We had a mutual account, but I would never ever take money from that mutual account, even though my name was on it. I mean, that was in my eyes his money. And asking my ex-husband for money would end up in an argument about money, and me having to take more responsibility and accountability, and you're not trying hard enough, and you need to get a job. And I heard that all the time, you need to get a job. I was trying so hard. And again, if you were in career transition, and when you have multiple, if you've been in multiple different roles and you have such an array of experience, it's kind of hard to hone down. But again, I said in my prior video, it was my soul trying to figure out what my soul mission and purpose was because of my spiritual awakening. And I wasn't in the 3D world, meaning in the physical world that we're accustomed to. I was seeing so much more and believing there's so much more out there than what we are experiencing because of my spiritual awakening. And I never took his money for granted, or like I said, took money out of the shared account. I would never do that. And, when I did have a steady income coming in and so forth, I would pay for mortgage and bills and groceries, and we would take turns going out to eat. And, I love being able to do that. But it was hard when my savings went out, and savings, especially these days, it goes so fast. But, have the discussion, just really think about what really transpires regarding money. I think that's the biggest issue with people and relationships is money. So have the conversations. And I know it's hard. Believe me, I know it's hard. I cried a lot about this, even asking him for $50. And I felt so bad that my hairstylist would text me the day before and say, hey, your appointment's coming up. And there was one time that I canceled and said I couldn't make it. And I didn't want to tell her why, but I was too afraid to ask him for $50. So that's how, the red flags when you can't ask, to go and, having depression, going through all this, that was, again, something that I look forward to, but I just couldn't at that moment. I was really, really in the thick of it. I just couldn't ask him for it. So be mindful of money issues. We always took the same vacations. That's something that when we were going through the divorce process, we said to each other, we wish we would have traveled more in different places. Right before I told him I wanted a divorce, November 2023, we had a trip booked to the same location that we always went to. And I knew I had to have the conversation before this trip that we were supposed to go on, because it was an 8-hour ride in the car. And he was always on me about, you need to get a job. And, I was trying, and in his eyes, he didn't realize how hard I was trying, and I was networking and trying to figure things out. Again, it was a soul that I was trying to align with, and not going back in the corporate world and mental health. And I end up going back, to the corporate world. And I spoke about that in a prior video. But, I didn't want to be in an 8-hour car hearing him, because that was the only thing that it seemed that he wanted to talk about is, me getting a job and me not contributing and so forth. And it was just so taxing on my mental health. And I'm like, I can't do this. I just can't do this anymore. So I had to have that conversation before we had this trip planned. So, if you are always going to the same vacation, now there are places that, people go to that if you enjoy going to those places, fine. But if you fast forward ahead a couple years and say, why do we go all those same places? Because there's so many wonderful, beautiful places throughout the entire, I live in the United States, but also worldwide. There's so much beauty in the world. So you got to get out there and experience it. walking on eggshells and avoiding tough conversations. That's what I felt like a lot, especially towards the last of it. I talk about this a lot, but when you have a different vibrational frequency that you're on than with your partner, and you're walking on eggshells and you're suppressing yourself just to make peace, that's a red flag. Topics that we avoided as a couple, well, me, I should say, is, talking about my spirituality and my spiritual awakening. As I explained in my prior video, I couldn't even explain what I was going through. But above all, I couldn't be around him and share with him what was happening inside of me because of all the changes that I was experiencing. And then, trying to have conversations that I wasn't sure what I was going through, and then trying to explain that to him. And then he's getting frustrated with me. And all I'm hearing is from him is like, you need to get a job and so forth. And I'm trying to figure all of this out. And it just made me shut down. Money, dreams, passion, my career transition took a long time. I didn't realize how long it would take, and I wasn't bringing in an income, which we would constantly, he would constantly be on me about. And trying to be an entrepreneur is not easy, but I knew I couldn't go back to the corporate world because it was destroying my mental health, which I spoke about in my prior video. Have these discussions as hard as and uncomfortable as it can be. And it wasn't like we were going to be living on the streets next. I mean, we were doing well. And believe me, I wanted to contribute to the marriage, but I was just so lost and confused. And also, it takes a long time when you're trying to be finding the right role, because when you're not in the right role, it's taxing on your mental health. And when you have mental health issues and you're struggling, it just takes on a whole different vibe, so to speak. It affects every area of your life. So you have to be happy in what you do with, a role, whatever you're experiencing. And he had a plan to pay the house off, and me losing my job was not part of the plan, which created a lot of problems in our marriage. And, I didn't know I was going to be losing my job. There was a lot of change. There was a lot of change throughout my tenure at my prior, that job that I was in. I went through a lot during that tenure, especially with the changes with the organization. And, I was the last one of a 10-person team. It was very hard towards the end. It was just myself and my manager, and she retired 2 years prior to that. I tried to stick it out as long as I could. And even though, I was unhappy towards the end, the universe gave me a bam moment, say, hey, if you're not going to do something about, because you're stuck and stagnant in a role that you are no longer happy in because of changes, which I won't go into. There's more involved, and I'm not going to put all that out there. But the universe gave me a bam moment. And, the bam moment, even though I was unhappy, you're just not prepared for it. You're no longer wanted here. So that was tough. My ex-husband was money driven because of his upbringing, which affected his mindset. And in some ways, I felt like he was punishing me or wanted to punish me for not earning money, because money was an important value for him. And money, it is important value, but money isn't everything. The term money can't buy happiness, it's true. There's a lot of people that are happy that don't have a lot of money. So it's a total mindset. And there wasn't a lot of open communication or a safe space for communicating about money. And again, walking on eggshells and having tough conversations, I just shut down because I didn't feel seen, heard, and valued. So be cognizant of these red flags. They're very important. Role playing, housewife. So he had worked out of town, and he would come back home, and I would make sure that I would have dinner on the table, and just feeling like, a good wife. That was my duty, so to speak. Not that he asked me to, but I made sure that everything was cleaned up and And I didn't have the time because I was unemployed, but I just made sure that everything was not perfect, but just rightfully so, just to keep the peace. And at some point, I realized that it wasn't really being authentic to myself because it was too late to stop because it would disrupt the dynamic. So I just kept playing the role and kept, to try to keep the peace. I would do these things to make sure that it wouldn't create more chaos. And I could sense his energy when he would come back home. And as soon as he would pull in the driveway, how's your job search going? Get a job yet? That was always the thing. And it was just like so, like I was trying. It was just so taxing on my mental health. And I would tell myself, stay in high vibes and don't let his energy affect your energy, and don't upset him further. So, I could feel his energy shifts, and don't let that affect my energy. But it was so hard. You're trying to keep your energy high and going through, mental health issues and everything else that I was trying to do, and playing the role, and being the dutiful housewife. And, when you experience all these things, and it's just like, is this worth it? If you're feeling disruption within yourself and it's affecting your peace of mind, this is something you really got to think about yourself. It's not selfish to put yourself first. It's necessary. As one of my sayings is, you can't pour from an empty cup. That cup needs to be full, and that needs to start with you. Depression and lack of my mental health support. My husband didn't feel like a safe place. And I think it's because he didn't understand my depression. After I lost my job in April 2017 and my dad passed away that same year of November 2017, I felt so lost and began experiencing the first of my spiritual awakening, which really happened in the fall of 2020 when I had my full spiritual awakening. And my depression was just settling in even deeper because around the same time, my sister was getting married with a destination wedding in 2017. And my ex and I had already planned a vacation around that same time. And I learned that they had already booked the tickets, and I didn't have the money to rearrange my plans. So that became a disagreement, going with my ex on vacation or being with, my sister and my family for her destination wedding that ended up being the same weekend of this planned trip that we had already planned for a year in advance. So the disconnection between myself and the rest of the world had started with, my family, my partner, my friends, everyone. I felt so alone. I felt so misunderstood and so isolated from everyone due to my spiritual awakening, and going, what the heck am I going through? What am I experiencing? I can't even figure this out. As I said prior, after my dad passed, I was so lost. And I remember saying, God, just take me. I just want to be with my dad. Because when you're confused and going through your spiritual awakening and you feel like you're crazy, it's tough. It is really tough. And then money was always a big issue, even though we weren't struggling. However, he was wanting to pay off the house, and it was a constant. And I felt that that was the only thing that we would ever talk about is, you need to get a job. We want to pay off the house. And I get it. Believe me, I get all those things. I wanted to do that too. But it wasn't as easy as it all seemed in his head. He has a very explicit job that he has credentials for and so forth, and has an array of experience in that field. So it was easier for him to find work more so than me. It's a different world out there. It's just so different. And like I said, I had some savings, but it ran out. And, I contributed to the marriage as best I could. helping pay for the mortgage and the bills and the groceries and going out to eat. But, I then ran out of that money, and money was always the issue. And then I found a job and I hated it. And again, no ill will to that company that I worked for nor the people. It just wasn't aligned with my soul mission and purpose. It worsened my depression and I was miserable. But I had to keep it as long as I could because it took me so long to find a job. And it just created more rift between my husband and I. When he actually experienced a job loss from a role that he had been in for quite a long time, I think he finally understood to some extent how I felt because he started going through a depression, even at a surface level. And, for the longest time, he ignored it and pretended that I didn't have depression. I felt unable to truly relate to what I was experiencing. But I think when he finally had this experiencing, which didn't last very long, I think he finally got it. But, it was a little too late. So if you are in a partnership where your significant other has mental health issues, such as depression or anxiety, just hold space for them. Even if you don't understand them, ask them, what can I do to help you? Instead of always, having whatever issues you may be going through. And, for a lot, that's children. I couldn't have children, so that wasn't an issue that we had come up. If there are issues that are always transpiring and you're not feeling seen, heard, and valued for who you truly are, take note of that. You got to find the common ground between one another. And that was just something that we fell out of the common ground. Oversharing with people outside of the marriage. So blame shifting and projections. Trust is huge for me. If I share something with you, I don't expect you to share it with other people. And, I would say, don't share this, and I would share, information with him. And he would make excuses saying, I can't keep a secret. And he would go tell his mom or, friends or bosses and so forth. And I didn't appreciate that. And that just made me shut down even more. And, he would blame me for sharing how I felt with friends I made in the last years of our marriage. And he would tell me it was emotional cheating. Emotional cheating? That's not emotional cheating. I was building relationships with people because I was trying to network and get people to know me for who I am so people could recommend me for my services and vice versa. And, I didn't have coworkers to go to at a role when you're being an entrepreneur, when you're, working from home and you're isolated behind a computer. I was building relationships with people worldwide for me to get to know people because I can service anyone throughout the world with wonderful programs such as Zoom and Google Meets and so forth. But, when you're not going to an actual role and having coworkers, that's hard. So when you networking and talking to other people, you build relationships. Just be cognizant of what you share to somebody, especially when they go to other people. That's a red flag. Trust is huge for me. So when you open up to someone, make sure that you can trust them. If that's how you feel. Some people are just blunt. I don't, even though I'm an Aries, I don't have that bluntness into me, as the Aries seems to be, but I'm pretty private, and so another red flag. Life beliefs. We mostly shared same political beliefs, but then when I was awakening, I bring up topics and themes that would sometimes get my ex-husband to mock me or judge me or call me a conspiracy theorist instead of having an open conversation with me. And we were unable to communicate, and I just shut down and not share with him. And instead I looked for like-minded people in the world in my network, which would cause my ex-husband to, again, accuse me of emotional cheating, and the projections just started. We couldn't even have a conversation about life events because I felt shut down because of his beliefs and my beliefs not meshing. So I wouldn't talk about them because I would feel his energy shift, and I couldn't even have a open conversation about things that I believed in. So, again, hold space for one another. And even if your beliefs are different from one another, this is what I think, and share how you feel. And it might not resonate with your partner. And that's okay to have different beliefs, but don't belittle or make someone feel less than when you have beliefs that are not your own. Because again, it just made me shut down and not want to communicate. And that was hard. Sacrifices after sacrifices after sacrifices. So acknowledge them. I wanted kids when we first moved into the house, and he didn't want to. I'm very hard on myself. I kept gaining weight to suppress my emotional needs and wounds. I didn't want to get pregnant on top of being overweight due to my upbringing of always being nagged about my weight. And then later on, many years later, I said, screw it. And I went to get a fertility test to see if I can get pregnant. And they said my results that I had a less than 1% chance of getting pregnant on my own, and less than 4% with fertility. And fertility costs so freaking much. And when I told my ex about this, he accused me of not getting a second opinion, even though he didn't want children at the early part of our marriage. And that was hard. I really wanted kids. And I would always feel really bad when Father's Day would come up and I couldn't have kids. And also around Christmas, because I couldn't have kids. That was really tough. An adoption is just so expensive. To just make it absolutely ridiculous for adopting. And due to my ex-husband's upbringing, I used to love the holidays. And he would always get in a bad mood because as a child, he was always going to house. And, I had a very fun upbringing of Christmas. Christmas was always spent with family, my family, and then my grandma. And, they say, once the glue of the family passes, the family dynamics changed, and it did. When my grandma passed away, a lot of the gatherings have stopped, and he would just get in a bad mood. And I would just tell him, I don't want you going with me because of his attitude and energy. And that was tough because Christmas used to bring me so much joy, and then it didn't because, and I get from where he was coming from his upbringing, because things, my upbringing has affected me. But, we have to be cognizant of our triggers, and we have to work through them and heal them, just like I have since childhood. And I'm still, a work in progress. And, instead of dealing with his own inner work and inner wounds, he made his wounds feel like they were a burden, and me taking on his wounds and not feeling as joyful. And that was hard, and I had to suffer because he was suffering, and that caused, rifts between us as well. So just be cognizant of all these red flags that I was speaking of. And I don't have any ill will. I'm not trying to, I was just as guilty in things in my marriage as he was. I'm not perfect. I know I have a lot of things to work on, but I think the biggest thing in all of these is, as tough as it is and how uncomfortable it is have the tough conversations. No matter how draining it can be and how triggered one may become, you have to have the tough conversations. Even if the person doesn't get you for who you are, just know that those are red flags. And if they're not willing to help you and hold space for you and see, your perspective, then it's time to move on. Just know that when you do move on, things do get better. I'm very proud of my growth. And again, I say, I am a work in progress. But to look back on it's going on 2 years in November when I told him I wanted a divorce, to look back on everything that I've been through, and I've never lived on my own before, so, that was big in and of itself. But just, to be around like-minded people, putting myself out there in the community, trying to find new friendships because, as I evolve, the people that used to get me, the old version of me, no longer get the rediscovered version of me. But it does get easier. But you have to be willing to do the inner work. You have to love yourself for who you are. You have to forgive yourself for everything that you have put yourself through. You have to accept your flaws, your imperfections. I'm very hard on myself, but I'm trying. And that's all you can do is try. Just try. And every day, live in the present moment, because there's so much beauty when you really, truly take the time. And solitude is great. There are times where I love being by myself, and there are times when I just cry myself to sleep because I don't want to be alone. But know that you will get through it. I am. It does get easier. And you've got this. I'm here to help you from your butterfly, or to become a butterfly and soar just like my beautiful butterflies. And I'm going to keep soaring, and I'm going to keep fulfilling my soul's mission and purpose. And that is here to help you, move you forward, just like I'm moving myself forward. Have a great day.